Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Drielle, for those who don't know me, and I teach English as a second language. I teach you how to communicate in English effectively and with quality. In today's video, we're gonna learn how to make sentences in English. I'm gonna teach you how to construct your sentences, but of course, I wouldn't be able to teach everything in one class, so that's why I'm gonna teach you the basics so you understand how a sentence works in English, and then you're able to make your own. But one thing that helped me a lot and might help you is that practice and contact with English would make you learn better and faster. More than just memorizing grammar rules, you want to practice and you want to be in contact with English. So you don't have to memorize, but it will come to you naturally because you are in that environment. Now, if you don't live in a country, that speaks English as a second language or officially, you have to create your own immersion environment. So immerse yourself in English as much as you can. Everything that you control should be in English, such as your phone, your computer, maybe the notes that you take. When you're alone, just try to talk to yourself in English out loud. Try to control what you watch and the language that you watch. Try to avoid subtitles, because when you turn the subtitles on, you're reading and you're not practicing your listening effectively. Before we jump into class, I'd like to ask you to subscribe if you're not a subscriber and to thumbs up this video. I'm also on other social medias. I'm on Instagram. I also have a podcast and I have a blog, so I'm gonna make sure that I'll leave all the links in the description box down below. Now, without further ado, let's go to our PowerPoint presentation. So when you make a sentence, there are two things that you're striving for. You want that the sentence is almost always grammatically correct. What does that mean? Most of the times in spoken English, we say our sentences grammatically correct, but not always. I think all of the languages, they don't follow grammar rules 100% strictly, and the same happens in English. So almost always you want to make your sentences grammatically correct. But there are some times that you don't really need grammar to make your sentences, and that it is not correct, but because everybody does it, it becomes acceptable. But if you're just starting learning English and you don't know the mistakes that you can make, just start learning what is right. And then along the way, you will see how people usually talk, and you're gonna start talking like those people. And then you also want to make sure that your sentences make sense, that your phrase makes sense. And sometimes that loses a little bit because you're translating the sentences that you're forming, that you're making. You're translating your speech from your native language to English. And that is a really bad mistake because, one, you become addicted to making those mistakes. You become addicted to building your sentences in English like you would speaking your native language. So you don't want to do that. And second of all, because as I said before, grammar rules are different from one language to another language. Not only that, the way that you build your sentences are different. Word choice are different. There are so many words that I used to use in Portuguese, but I don't use it in English just because it's not part of my identity in English. So whenever you're learning a second language, you just have to forget about you in your native language. You have to create a new different identity, and that includes changing your voice, intonation, pronunciation, word choice, the way you speak and how you speak it and how you speak. So you just want to you want to know, and you need to know how you want to sound in the other language. So how do you want to sound in English will really impact the way that you speak. So for example, were you nervous for the time of the interview? Here, I just grabbed some sentences that some followers had sent me over Instagram, and I just want to show you about grammar and also making sense. So were you nervous for the time of the interview? Here, what's wrong is that he used the preposition for instead of at the time of the interview. So maybe in your native language, for is what you would use to make the sentence, but in English, it's a complete different preposition. In this case, you were going to use at. So were you nervous at the time of the interview? And then he continued, did you wrap up at some point? Here, he translated straight from Portuguese to English, and it's grammatically correct, but it doesn't make any sense because the word he chose, the expression he chose, doesn't fit the sentence, doesn't fit the phrase and the context. So I had an interview 2 weeks ago, and I posted on my stories, and a follower just wanted to say if I got confused at any point, if I said something, if during my interview I just felt confused and just lost my train of thought. So instead of just saying like, did you lose your train of thought at some point, he said wrapped up, because wrapped up in Portuguese translates to losing your train of thought. So here, sometimes the expression that you think it means something and you can use in this context, you can't really use in that context. Did you lose your train of thought at some point? Now the second sentence, or it's seeming like my children went around. So here I think I posted my house disorganized or something like that. Then my follower said, it's seeming like my children went around. The problem with this is the verb seeming, first of all, right? Seeming, because if you know grammar rules, you know that there are types of verbs. There are action verbs, there are state verbs, and seem, it's a state. To seem, it's a stative verb, meaning that you cannot use in the ing forms most of the times. So it's seeming, no, it seems, then it would be correct because you don't use the verb to seem in the ing form when it's stative. So it seems, and then also he used the verb to be here, which he shouldn't have. So that's why he also said seeming, because he added the verb to be here. But we don't say in the present continuous form, it's just a simple present sentence. So it seems like my children went around. So like they were around here, because it's so messy and his kids make a mess, so it looks like my children were there. So I wouldn't use the verb go in this case in the past, which is went, but I would use the verb to be, so were around. So it seems like my children were around. Then it would be more correct and it would make better sense. So to understand a sentence, there are some things that I need you to know. I needed to know what's a noun, a subject, a verb, and a pronoun in English. Well, a noun, it's a place, a thing, a person, and it's just common names. You have two types of nouns. You have proper and common nouns, such as table, or microphone, or clothes. All of those are nouns. Proper nouns are names of companies or names of people. So, for example, Drielle, it's a proper noun. A subject is the person or the thing in your sentence that is taking the action, that is producing the action, and also the one that is being described. So the subject pretty much is the star of your sentence, is the main character, is the star. So we are going to be talking about this subject, what the subject did, and all the description that we have is around the subject. So pretty much all of the sentences in English need to have a subject. Next, we have a verb. A verb is the action the subject takes. It's the action itself. Whenever you're thinking about the verb, you also need to consider about the tenses. You want to know the tense that you want to explore and use. Do you want to use present simple? Do you want to use past simple? And for that, you need to understand and learn what those tenses, those different tenses. And for that, you need to know what tenses describe better your action. So if you're talking about a general thing, if you're talking about something that was ongoing in the past, or something that happened in the past and it still happens today. So you just have to know which tense you want to use and if it's the correct tense. Then you have the pronoun, which is a word used in place of a noun. So a pronoun is a word used in place of a noun. So instead of saying Drielle, you can say she. Instead of saying microphone, you can say it. Next thing you need to know is about adjectives, adverbs, prepositions, and conjunctions. Adjectives, they will give you a description and they will modify the noun. So it's almost like a relationship to nouns and other adjectives. So an adjective expresses a relationship to the nouns and to other adjectives too. You can describe, you can modify those nouns and those pronouns and so forth. So beautiful and white and shiny, all those are examples of an adjective. And then you have an adverb, which is a word that would describe further your verb or other adverbs. Usually they end in ly, like quickly and carefully and brightly, but not always. Preposition, it's a word that describes the relationship to a noun. So it may tell you the location or the purpose of something. So it can be from or under or until. And then you have the conjunction. Sometimes we tend to make simple sentences, such as Drielle was busy. Drielle was busy. Drielle worked a lot. Instead of saying that, you can just combine all those two sentences in one using conjunction. So for example, Drielle was busy and she worked a lot. Here I made two separate phrases into one using conjunction. So after you learn about that and you understand a little about that, the next thing you want to understand is about auxiliary verbs. We have different auxiliary verbs and their main goal, their main function is to indicate the tense, the mood, the voice of other verbs. So it will give you further explanation. They're called auxiliary because they're going to help you understand your sentence better. And then you have verb to be, you have do and does, you have and has, and then you have did, you have had. But one thing that you should be aware is that not always those auxiliary verbs will be auxiliary verbs. So verb to be, do and does, have and has, did and had, they can be auxiliary verbs, but they can also be an action verb. So for example, I do my homework every day. The sentence here, we have the word, but do here, it's not an auxiliary verb. It's a main verb. It's telling me what the subject, I, is doing, the action. If I want to use an auxiliary verb here, I would have to have do as an auxiliary verb and do as my main action verb. So for example, do you do your homework every day? Do you do your homework every day? Same thing happens with have or has. I have 4 cats. Have here, it's an action verb describing the action of my subject. Every time you see have as an auxiliary verb, it's because it's present in those perfect tenses. So have you ever? Have I never? You also have modal verbs, and there are multiples. Don't try to memorize them. Just try to learn them and use them into context. Can and could, may and might, should, would or shall, must or ought to, will. And then the next thing you want to know is that verbs can be transitive or intransitive. Why is that important? Some languages don't have this. Some verbs stand by themselves. So in Portuguese, if I say, do you like cats? A Brazilian, in Portuguese, it's normal and correct to say, yes, I like. In English, like is not an intransitive verb, it's a transitive verb. And that simply means that the verb cannot stand alone. It needs an object to make sense. So a transitive verb needs an object, something to transfer the action to. An intransitive verb, it's the opposite. It's a verb that it can stand alone and it doesn't really need an object. So she likes, the question is, she likes what? She likes strawberry. She likes dancing. So the verb like is a transitive verb. It cannot stand by itself. She runs. Okay, so run, it's a intransitive verb. It can stand by itself and it makes sense. It makes perfect sense. I don't need an object. I don't need a complement. It can stand by itself. So your goal when you're making a sentence is to make sure that you have at least a subject and a verb. and knowing if that verb needs an object, a complement or not. So for example, I speak 4 languages. Here I have my subject, I. And then I have my verb, speak. And then I have my object, 4 languages. What's important here is that I know which tense I'm using and which pronoun I'm using. So if I say, she speaks 4 languages. My name is Drielle, and here my subject is my, and then my name, actually my name is the subject, is my verb, and Drielle, it's the one that is receiving the action here. So the most basic sentence and the most simpler sentence is called imperatives, and those are to give orders, and it can be mean orders, or it can be orders in a sense that is a counsel and advice that someone is giving you. So for example, shut the door on your way out. So shut the door on your way out is an order, like shut the door. Shut the door, it's an order, it's an imperative. So can you just imagine yourself walking in the street and then you hear someone saying or yelling, screaming, run. You wouldn't think twice, it would start running. So run, it's a complete sentence. Only one verb, but it makes sense. Eat fast. Eat fast, 2 words, 1 verb, 1 adjective. But it makes sense because the eat fast, it stands by itself. Do it. So I don't know if I should do it. Do it. Do it, complete sentence made out of 1 verb and 1 pronoun. Get up. Get up. This is a phrasal verb and it makes sense by itself. That is the basics, the most basic sentence that you're going to find. The next basic sentence is the one that is formed by subject, verb, and object. So Drielle speaks. Speak here, it's a transitive verb, meaning that it needs an object, something to transfer the action to. So if I say Drielle speaks, I'm going to be like, or the other person is going to be like, okay, what does she speak? So Drielle speaks English. Now it makes perfect sense because we have a subject, a verb, and an object. The object is the one that is receiving the action, the complement. So your sentence makes sense. Her dog eats. It's a complete sentence. It's grammatically correct. You have her dog as a subject and the verb eats, which stands by itself because it's in an imperative verb, but it doesn't make sense. Her dog eats. Okay, good for the dog. No, you need more information. So remember, your goal is to make a grammatically correct sentence and also a sentence that makes sense. So here it's grammatically correct, but it doesn't make any sense. So her dog eats in the mornings. Now it makes sense. Julia's mother shops. Okay, great information, but I need more. So Julia's mother shops a lot. So here you have Julia's mother, which is the subject, shops, my verb, and a lot, which is my complement. Drielle says. Drielle says what? I need more information. Oh, so Drielle says Drielle says that she's Brazilian. Now it makes sense. Now it's complete. So most of your English sentences will require you the subject and the verb. And the subject needs to be near the beginning of the sentence before the verb. So that's the order that you're looking at. And then you can start adding adjectives. So an adjective in English will most of the times come before the word it's describing. So the smart American teacher. I have 2 adjectives here, and I'm talking about adjective order, but because this lesson is not about adjectives, but sentences, I'm not gonna go into depth about adjectives. But the smart American teacher, which is an adjective of opinion, comes first, and then America, nationality, and then teacher. So I have 1 adjective describing another adjective. So smart is describing the American teacher. The teacher taught the quiet young Chinese students. So I'm placing my adjectives here before the word it's describing, such as students. And not only that, the young Chinese students, the quiet young Chinese students. Another way of using adjectives in a sentence is to add a verb to be. So the Chinese students are quiet and young. So you can have your subject and the correspondent verb to be, and then quiet and young, which are the adjectives, the words that are describing it. So I can say the American teacher is smart. I can say the quiet young Chinese students were taught by the American teacher or by the teacher. The Chinese students are quiet and young. Psychological problems. So I have one word that it doesn't look like an adjective describing another word. Adjectives sometimes don't have the look that you think they have, such as quiet, pretty, smart, because all of those clearly are adjectives. It's not a rock science. But psychological, sometimes you don't see it as an adjective, but it is in this sentence at least. So psychological is describing what type of problems a person may have or has. So psychological problems. And then if you want to add more information to your sentence, so you start with the basics and then you start adding more information and making your sentences more complex. So as you are in that process, you want to start using adverbs, which will give more information about what you're saying. So for example, she always cooks pizza. I can simply say she cooks pizza. It's a complete nice sentence. I have my subject, my verb, and my object. But I want to give you more information. So I may just let you know the frequency. So she always cooks pizza. What is the frequency of the action cook? She always cooks pizza. An adverb can have 3 different placements in a sentence. It can come in 3 different places. But it is incorrect and it will never come between your subject and your verb. Actually, but you're not going to use an adverb between your verb and the object. Even though the adverb can go in 3 different places in a sentence, it will never come between a verb and its object, okay? So what are the 3 different places that it can be placed? Well, in the beginning of your sentence, at the beginning of your sentence, such as yesterday the teacher taught the students. It can come at the end of your sentence. The students will take the test tomorrow. Or it can come between the subject and the verb. She often studies before class. So she often hear my adverb coming before my verb and after my subject. There are some rules involving placement, but because we're not talking about adverbs, I'm not gonna go into depth about those. So best way to learn is practicing and skipping your and just to have an active listening. What do I mean by that? Just pay attention to the English that is around you. And that is it for today. If you like this lesson, if you like my channel, if you like me explaining and teaching you English, give it a thumbs up. I would really appreciate if you thumbs up this video, subscribe if you're not a subscriber, and follow me on the other social medias. I have plenty of videos on this YouTube channel, so feel free to browse through those. I have a lot of lessons in English, taught in English. Now, if you do speak Portuguese, I also have some lessons for you, so just scroll down and pick and choose the video that you want to watch. I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.